Well, we're here after a pretty stunning week. And it's really wonderful to be here together because I can look around this room and have a strong sense that we're all feeling the same way, give or take. And so talking about discernment, how to make decisions in this climate right now is both challenging and inviting. And first of all, I want to thank the APP for consistently over the years raising the hard questions and hanging in there to see just answers. The diocese is much richer because of all the work that the APP has done through the years. So it's a real privilege to be here with you. When I first got the call and the invitation to be here tonight, it was months ago. So I was thinking, I was talking to a friend and I said, it's going to be 2 days after the election. And she said, why don't you write 2 talks? And as I thought about that, I thought, no, there's one message. And it's a hard message for us to hear right now, but an important one. It's from the first letter of Peter. And it's this: always have your answer ready for people who ask you the reason for your hope that you all have, but give it with courtesy and respect and a clear conscience. Have the answer ready for your hope. As I look around this room, all of us have been through a lot in life. And we realize that hope is really an action. It's something we do. It's not necessarily something we feel. It's a choice to be hopeful in trying times. And you have done this through the years. This is not new to you. You consistently have chosen hope over despair, or you wouldn't be here. So take a moment to savor that. Think of your own life and the choices you've made. And this is another choice. This is another step on that journey. Because your hope breeds hope. Your goodness breeds goodness. And it's really a privilege to be in your presence. So discernment is a word that's kind of bandied around a lot. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about it and what it is. As its essence, it's in a traditional way, it's seeking the will of God in your life. And in that is to really trust and believe that when you were created for these times. So you have a body of gifts within you that the world needs right now. And that's what I want to focus on tonight, to help you think through your life and what gifts have emerged that you know make a difference. Probably each one of you can be in a room and your presence there makes a big difference. When I look around, and those of you I know, that's really true. So tonight, I'd like you to just kind of burrow down and think about the special gifts God has given you to meet these times. I remember one time, for Sisters of St. Joseph, they know this good friend, Carlene Lynch. Carlene said, you have to see this video. So we sat down on the couch and she put the video in, and it was a video of a rehearsal of the New York Philharmonic with Leonard Bernstein conducting. And it was a rehearsal with a soprano in particular. She was practicing an aria she was going to sing for a performance. So Bernstein kept stopping all along the way and giving her points how to project your voice, how to sing with the feeling that this demanded. So he would stop, and she would start all over again. And then finally, she took a moment, the music started, she picked up her cue, took a step forward, and this exquisite sound came out of her, just radiated through the hall. And Leonard Bernstein, tears rolling down his cheeks, and his hands held high, said, "Yes, yes, yes. That's what I heard when I made this." And Carlene said to me, "I think that's what God says when we really live up to who we really are." So these days, I really invite you to live up to who you really are, the best of you. Because it really is easy to get discouraged. It really is sad to see that some things that have grown in our country are not going to be nourished. And that racism and misogyny continues at a high rate. But what do you bring to the conversation? What do you bring to this world at this time? I've organized this and to hold up some people through the years that I've been touched by, and to share with you what gave them spirit and what gave them hope in trying times. And the first person I'm going to hold up is Dag Hammarskjöld. If you remember, he was Secretary General of the UN back in the 60s. And he was a great, great leader. And he died in a plane crash. It was suspected that there had been sabotage. The train had been sabotaged to kill him, but it was never proven. When he died, he had given permission before he had died to a good friend to publish his journal, which is called Markings. And if you've never read that book, I highly recommend it. It's beautiful. It's his reflections, mostly at the end of the day. And it revealed his mystical gifts as a leader. It was interesting. He never joined an organized church. He felt that narrowed him. He wanted to be open to all religions throughout the world so that he could understand people better. He thought that would help him do his work as a public servant better. But there's a quote that he has in Markings. He talks about the great commitment, which is to serve all humankind. And then the little commitment, which is to be in relation to the actual people in your life, the people who form you, the people with whom you socialize and with whom you have deep conversations. And he says this: the great commitment to serve all humankind all too easily obscures the little one. But without the humility and warmth for the many, without them, you will live in a world of abstraction where your solipsism, your greed for power, and your death wish lack the one opponent which is stronger than they: love. Love, which is without an object, the outflowing of a power released by self-surrender, but which would remain a sublime sort of superhuman self-assertion, powerless against the negative forces within you, if it were not tamed by the yoke of human intimacy. It is better for the health of the soul to make one person good than to sacrifice yourself for many. Then he goes on to say, for the mature person, these are not alternatives, but two aspects of self-realization, which mutually support one another, both being the outcome of one and the same choice. A lot of words, but a very powerful message. Especially, I find especially that line about being tamed by the yoke of human intimacy, to let people in. This quote is very precious for me because when I was very, very young, maybe 29 or 30, we were having a federation meeting in our mother house, and all the people who were teaching in Beaver County were called in to serve tables during this event, which we loved because then we got to listen to the talks at night. But I happened to be serving this table. I was just putting potatoes, I can remember that, on the table, and one of our sisters asked about another sister from Boston, because they had gone to Boston College together. And the sister from Boston said, oh, she's fine, she's fine. She said, there's a funny thing about her. She said, I think she has spent her whole life loving everyone. I'm not sure she ever loved anyone. I almost dropped the potatoes because that's the way I was living. I was loving everybody, but I wasn't loving anybody. And that was such a moment of conversion for me. And this, I accidentally picked up markings and found this quote. And it was such a moment. Let's think of it your own life. At times when something just turned upside down. Those are times when you know how God is acting in you. The activity of God is awakening you to something. And they're precious moments, and they're scary moments, almost always scary moments. And you do the best you can when they happen. They form who you are. The second person I want to talk about is Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, and we haven't heard yet whether she was reelected to Congress. But in her 2024 book, The Art of Power, she writes, people have asked me what role faith has played in my political life. Well, I believe, of course, in the separation of church and state. I do believe that the values of my faith have informed my priorities. For example, my commitment to human rights springs from my belief that, as Representative John Lewis always used to say, there's a spark of divinity in every person that needs to be respected. There's a spark of divinity in every person that needs to be respected. Nancy Pelosi continues, my deep commitment to honoring the spark of divinity in every person is why I turn to public service. If the spark of divinity has been my inspiration, the Gospel of Matthew 25 it's been my guide. I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. The Greek philosopher Socrates sums it up in 2 words: know yourself. Know yourself. There's some Buddhist wisdom that says we walk through life wearing a garment that has two pockets with a secret in each pocket. In one pocket is the secret, I'm nothing. In light of the entire universe, I'm completely insignificant. And the other pocket holds a secret. For me, the universe was made. And both are true. Both are true. I remember when hearing an interview with a gentleman who worked at NASA when they were developing the James Webb telescope. And he was going on and on about what this new telescope would do. And the person who was interviewing him said, kind of tongue in cheek, so are we going to be able to see the Big Bang with this new telescope? And very seriously, he said, no, not the Big Bang, because that happened 13.5 billion years ago. And this only goes back 12 billion years. I was in the car listening to that. Turned off the radio. What does that mean? And I was in Washington at the time, and one of the women in our parish worked at NASA. So I got her after Mass and told her about this interview. She said, I'm working on the James Webb telescope. I said, what does that mean? That it only goes back 12 billion years. And she said, well, the lens on this is so refined that there are stars in the universe that were born a billion years ago, or 12 billion, and their light is only reaching Earth now. And this telescope will ride that light back to its origin. So you actually can see that star being born from 12 billion years ago. Listen, it just blow your mind. So when we say, for us, the universe was made, it's true. And when we say we're utterly insignificant, that's true too. And we walk through life carrying those precious secrets. And so, one of our sisters tells the story of her niece and nephew-in-law who couldn't have children. So the couple decided to adopt a child. We'll call him Peter. By the time Peter was 2 years old, it was very clear that he was very precocious. By the time he was 3, they knew he needed a sibling. So they adopted Joey. And he was there about 2 or 3 weeks. And Peter said to his mother, Mom, I think you better call the social worker. And she said, why? I think we better send Joey back. She said, why would we do that? He said, because I still require a great deal of attention. The kid was honest. So are you like him? You still require a great deal of attention? Often we do. On the other hand, Benedictine Father Demetrius Stam, who is beloved by many of us, and, a great scripture scholar, he tells a story of he was visiting his twin brother one time, and he was in the backyard the next morning after he arrived, praying the office, and his 4-year-old nephew came out. His name was Paul, and Paul was just staring at him for a while. He said, what are you doing? And Demetrius said, oh, I'm thanking God. And he said, what for? He said, well, this beautiful day, and that I'm here visiting you, that's a great gift. And that those flowers over there that your mother planted, they're beautiful. I'm thanking God for all of that. But most of all, I'm thanking God for Paul. And he said, the little boy looked at him and he said, Paul who? And Demetrius uses that as how hard it is for us to let in that we are truly loved by another person. and yet how important it is. We often deflect it, we often deny it, but the gift of receiving love is a very powerful gift that we have and need to have. So, whatever your personality, you may fall in the middle of both those scenarios. You may still need a great deal of attention, or you may hesitate that anybody could really love you. And that's the journey of life. It takes a lifetime to trust. And every human being that loves us is the incarnation of God loving us. That's what you have to remember. Like all the things we get uptight about probably don't mean anything to God in the light of his love for us. And so to hold on to that, to really hold on to that, to believe when you don't feel like believing, is really, really important because it's true. Everything about God is love. And to really claim that gift and give it as a gift to others is the best thing you can do with your life. So, also, part of discernment is being in touch with the world you live in. And all of you can say a rousing yes to that. You've done that all your lives. And I think Pope Francis is a wonderful model of that. When you think of his writings, you know, has written about the environment very prophetically and urgently about the environment. But he also, that encyclical, Care for Our Common Home, it's our common home. We all live here, and some better than others. His very first apostolic exhortation was the joy of the gospel. You know, to see the joy in the gospel. And the joy of love. And his most recent one is simple. He loves us. He's basing it around the Feast of the Sacred Heart. But what he's saying is God loves us. Let it in. Let it in. And finally, I'd like to recommend a book if you haven't read it. It's called The Fourth Turning is Here. It's an interesting book. It's the author is Neil Howe, Howe. And he and another historian, William Strauss, about 25 years ago, wrote a book called The Fourth Turning. And what it is that they trace back to Roman Greco times and discovered this archetype that runs through about every 100 years. Sometimes it's 80 years, sometimes it's 120 years. But around every 100 years, these archetypes emerge. What they call the hero generation. And if we look at the 20th century, that was, you know, those who fought in World War I and World War II, they were the hero generation. Then followed by the silent generation. And they're more, it's not that they don't stand up for anything. It's just that they implement. So they were too young to fight in the world wars. But as they grew up, they began to build up the country after the wars. And then the third archetype is the prophetic generation. They're the children who grow up in more stable times. And so they rail against everything. And for us in this country, it was the 60s. It was, you know, the civil rights movement, all the demonstrations against all the wars. And then the next generation is the nomads, because they grow up with all the institutions falling down. and they begin to wonder because they don't have the roots. Like after Vatican II, that was such an exciting time, but the books weren't written yet about how to teach Vatican II. And so the children who grew up in Catholic schools, then they learned how to love one another, but that was about it. That's a pretty important lesson, but it's not the whole of it. And now you have this reaction going back to pre-Vatican II times. Same thing in political life. And it's a wonder, this recent election, that people are looking for a leader who seems to know what to do. It's a mystery. But somehow he has learned the skill of projecting that he knows what should be done. He won't do it, but he's projecting that he has answers instead of inviting into the conversation, inviting the nation into the conversation. So that's where we are. Several years ago, a reporter from NPR interviewed Parker Palmer about his work in peacemaking, seeking an answer to what kept him grounded. And Palmer quoted an Iraqi citizen who had served as a translator to the US troops during the Iraqi war. And he joined them because he was so turned off by Saddam Hussein and his cruelty. And Parker Palmer asked him, how did you feel when you found out that Americans who tortured prisoners of war could be just as awful as Saddam Hussein? And he said, I think our call, this is the Iraqi translator, I think our call is to stand in the tragic gap. The space between the very best we can be as human beings and the very worst we can be. To stand in the tragic gap and hold sanity in the middle. I think Pope Francis said a similar thing in his book, Let Us Dream. He says, we have to hold the polarities until the Holy Spirit encompasses the polarities and raises the conversation to a whole other level where the polarities don't even matter anymore. And I offer that as your work right now, to really stand in the middle of those polarities, not arguing, not fighting, just standing there, just being there. It's tough work, and it doesn't even feel like work, but it feels passive, but it isn't. Goodness is never passive. It's contagious. I'm going to close with this interview with Krista Tippett. She did an interview with the communications director at LCWR. And the person who interviewed her said, you say that the choice to be hopeful is more courageous than the choice to be cynical. You say that hope is a choice that becomes a practice. It becomes part of our spiritual muscle memory. Can you say more about that? And how can it become a practice? And Krista Tippett says, a lot of virtues have been watered down, okay? And we treat them superficially. We have this idea that some of us are born happy, some have an optimistic nature, and some of us are naturally compassionate. But in fact, these are all ways of being that we can learn and choose and practice. The science around this is liberating and empowering. saying that we can actually change our bodies through our behavior. So hope is something we can choose. It is not a choice to deny what is hard and what is failing. These are hard times. So this isn't Pollyanna stuff. It's seeing the world as it really is. Hope has very open eyes about the suffering in the world and about what needs repairing and tending. And then Krista Tippett continues, choosing hope means our eyes are open to the places where beauty, grace, and dignity are also real. If we just look at what's not working, we just get depressed. So you have to feed yourself with beauty and goodness. And then she says, I talk about hope in part as a counter to cynicism, which is more fashionable in educated circles. It's intellectually acceptable to be cynical, and you almost have to defend yourself if you're hopeful. But cynicism is basically lazy. It's saying, well, I'm not surprised. So many things are bad in this world, and I'm not going to be able to change them. She says, right now, that's not a luxury we can afford. The call to stand in the tragic gap in our world, in our church, our families, our community, and help hope emerge. The sermon is a choice between good and evil, but mostly among goods, choosing the greater good for the sake of the beloved community, the beloved global community, being what we used to call a practicing Catholic or Protestant or Muslim or Jew, one who struggles for the sake of the community to believe anything. To be discerning is to deliberately choose what you practice on behalf of the beloved community. These times demand our agency, our will to be very intentional about what we choose to practice. In the Catholic tradition, we call the virtues of faith, hope, and charity theological virtues. Virtues that very specifically have to do with the way God is present in the world. So I invite you to just take a few moments to be quiet. And I'm going to offer 3 questions for you to just be quiet for about 10 minutes. And then after that, I'll invite you to go to the tables and share whatever you might want to share. Or with the Zoom groups, you'll be broken into groups. The first question, in all you heard, what attracted you? And why? What do you find yourself resisting? And why? And finally, what question or insights have arisen in you? You can take one of those if you want. You can take all 3. And what you heard, what attracted you and why? What do you find yourself resisting and why? Or what question or insights have arisen for you? So in about 10 minutes, I'll invite you at your tables just to share, each person share what you want to share, and then we'll open it up for conversation. Thank you. We'll just open it up. Everybody wants to share. We heard that interest you in.
One piece was a connection that we were making between standing in the tragic gap and the ministry of listening, coming out of the synod and the conversations in the spirit of that whole level. So it seemed to us that there was a connection there.
Did everybody hear her?
Oh.
No, could you repeat the question, please?
Sorry.
This is really, I suppose it would be maybe for Janet to say more about this, but we were fascinated by the tragic gap idea and what it might mean to stand in the midst of that as a ministry of listening, which was very much a mark of the synod, were the conversations in the spirit and this call to listen so fully and deeply to one another. So,
It's good to really understand where the other person is coming from.
listening.
Because there's no one way.
Yeah, we had a good discussion at our table. Excuse me, about trying to hold the polarities. When we have this inner voice that says, we gotta fix it. We're impatient. We're not happy not being able to fix it. And one of the women just commented about how despondent she was about, we're at the end of the line and this might be our last chance to look at the mess we're leaving and maybe I didn't do enough. And her daughter told her, you don't have to fix everything. And it's I guess that's the message. And frankly, Jesus wouldn't fix everything either. So I guess we're in good company.
Thank you.
Sister, what's that saying? You're not required.
Mhm.
You're not required to fix it all, so you have to do your part. Like there's a saying around.
That sounds pretty good.
It's Jewish, it comes out of the Talmud.
Here, I know. Nobody can fix everything, but anybody can fix something.
That's right.
Yeah, it was more you're not required to fix it all, but you are required to do your part.
Right.
So I think I scared my people.
Close the microphone. No, I was gonna say, I think that it's, you are not required, like you're saying, to do all of the work. But neither are you free to desist from all of it. Right, like you have to try.
One of the discussions we had at the table, and I think it's a challenge for all of us, is that spark of divinity in everybody and how challenging that is in whether it's our leaders or people we deal with in our everyday lives to see that spark. And how do we do that sometimes? Because sometimes it feels impossible. And it's a challenge. So if there's any tools, I mean, prayer obviously in reflection, but it's a challenge.
Sure is. But it's there.
Makes me think of a quote I heard by Vanier. He said, in all of us, there's a wolf that guards the wound. And if you can stay with somebody long enough, the wolf will lie down and the crying child will come out.
That is the truth. That is
I do have that quote from the Talmud. And I can speak loud enough, I think.
You gotta get the Zoom folks.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, they can't hear you, sorry.
I am loud, but
We need more.
do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it.
That's wonderful.
That's what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that had occurred to me on our table when we were talking about, kind of the disaster that we all feel has been visited upon us. And suddenly I thought of the time 40 years ago when our house burned. And looking back on it was one of the best things that ever happened because all of the neighbors came and helped us build a beautiful new house. It's the best thing that ever happened to us. And when I look back, and it pertains to this situation as well, why does God visit terrible things on us? It's to bring out the good in people, because otherwise we would never have to step forward. And so we're kind of at that moment right now. That's the hope.
It's wonderful.
There was a question on Zoom, which was somebody wanted you to repeat your comment about goodness being passive. If you remember that, you were saying earlier about goodness being passive. Somebody wanted you to repeat that.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have.
Goodness being passive. About goodness being passive.
Yeah, somebody wanted you to repeat that comment.
I think, it's Father Ron Rolheiser. He talks about the passivity of God. And when I first heard that, I had a lot of resistance to that. But as he talked about it, how God waits and the patience of God, and to really believe that and live it, that we can't fix everything. And maybe it shouldn't be fixed the way we would fix it. It's that balance of doing all you can and maintaining that humility to know you can't do everything. You really can't. And if you try, you get in the way anyway. It has to be a call from deep within. And that's a discerning voice, when to act and when to wait.
You repeat it in the pockets, one pocket and the other pocket, because I only got half of that. Yeah, I don't know what side. What was it, Hindi or?
Buddhist.
Buddhist. I didn't get that either, sorry. Wow.
Yeah, the Buddhists say we walk through life with a garment that has two pockets.
Okay.
And a secret in each pocket.
Okay.
And in one pocket is the secret that I am utterly insignificant. And in the other pocket is the secret, for me, the universe was made. And depending on how we grew up, we live more in one pocket than the other. But we spend a life becoming integrated as we carry both those truths. Anything else, anyone?
I'm struck that many of the comments that I'm listening to touch me individually and personally. But I'm also realizing that to keep on going, I need support from other people. And whatever it would be in trying to grow in many of the insights that you've shared with us. Because our discussion was very good and very helpful. It just strikes me that we need to keep thinking of us rather than just me trying to make this part of my own individual life.
The beloved community.
Time is going quite fast. I was watching the chat box on the Zoom. Y'all are making some great comments in there. So this part of our evening is coming to a close. Janet, do you have any closing reflections to offer? Closing comments, words of wisdom?
No. Just thank you. Thank you for being the people you are, all of you. I look around this room and I know some of the things that some of you do, and I'm deeply, deeply touched by your consistent commitment to the human race and beyond. So thank you. It's been a privilege being here.